Thanks for listening to this podcast of Trending with Timmery. If you haven't already subscribed, please catch us wherever you love to listen to your podcast, from the Relevant Radio app to Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review to help other people discover the podcast. Anything you share in terms of episodes, whether it's texting it to a friend, posting on social media, helps to build up the kingdom for God, to help confront the challenging issues we face as a culture, but with joy, with hope, and with an eternal perspective where our faith collides with everyday life, bringing eternal principles to help us live our life joyfully.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
I could use some good news. I don't know about you. News came out a little earlier today that SF 109, a bill basically running through the state legislature in Wyoming, has passed. It would block chemical RU-486 abortion pills from being legal in the state of Wyoming. Wyoming is so close to being the very first state to completely eradicate the RU-486 abortion pill being accessible in their state, killing babies and damaging and harming women. So pray. These are things we need to do across the country. There are other states looking at similar legislation to bring this barbaric practice of chemical abortion to an end in their state. So let's keep praying. Let's keep acting. A lot to do in our individual states. Roe versus Wade has been overturned, but there is much to do on the front for life, and we're called to be active. We're called to be involved. We're called to speak up, use our voices, and to prayerfully and financially support these programs that are working in our states to end abortion and help women and help save babies. So really important to be involved in your local state. You're listening to Trending with Timmery here on Relevant Radio. Are you struggling to have children? Do you know someone who is? My guest today is women's health expert, Dr. Susan Caldwell. We're going to be talking today about regulating women's cycles and what to do and what to be on the lookout for, starting with hey, what can I do at home? And then when I do look for medical intervention, what do I do? Part of the reason why I'm talking about this is because I've been talking a lot about hormonal contraception and in vitro fertilization over the last couple of weeks. And I have been receiving slews of emails from people saying, okay, I need help. Who would you contact? I'm struggling with irregularity. I think I have endometriosis. I have PCOS. I keep being prescribed birth control. And so we need real solutions. So gentlemen, if you're with us and you maybe think, this really isn't relevant to me, I'm actually riveted by the number of fathers reaching out saying, hey, I need help for my daughter. What information, what resources do you have? So these are great questions, and these are pieces of information. It could be your spouse. It could be someone who needs this help down the road or even now, and you have no idea. So buckle up, listen up. A little later on, I'm going to share a little bit about my experience being in the NICU with my daughter. Some interesting things happened while I was there that I really do think relate back to the abortion crisis we're experiencing in our culture, and something that we need to do to help heal what's happening with regard to the idea of motherhood in our modern culture. You're listening to Trending with Timmery. Joining me now is medical doctor, Dr. Susan Caldwell. You can find her at drsusancaldwell.com. I'll post a link on social media as well as the episode notes. Dr. Caldwell, I'm really excited to unpack this topic because I know you and I have really danced around it a lot, connecting everything from endometriosis and PCOS and Hashimoto's to the crisis of women's health and fertility. But we haven't directly talked about the irregularity of women's cycles. This is so common from the food we eat, food allergies, stressors, lack of exercise, lack of enough vitamin D or iron. So let's talk about, what would be a sign for an irregular cycle and what would be a sign that something needs to be done?
So, yeah, great. And the first thing to do for a woman who notices, hey, something is a little off. Number one, pay attention. Start to just pay attention. Don't freak out. Don't run to the doctor and say, doctor, fix it. But we need to just kind of look at it ourselves and to be very patient while we're being curious. And know that a lot of times irregular cycles are a response, like you said, to something that is off in our diet, in our we see this a lot in young girls in high school who are in sports, who aren't sleeping enough or eating enough. And a lot of times this will self-correct within a few months, 100 days for an egg to go through the process of ovulation. So any major stressor that happens, it can take about 100 days or 3 months to kind of self-correct. So sometimes just identifying, wow, like we had a major,
That's Dr. Susan Caldwell joining me today on Trending. It's really interesting what you're saying, Dr. Caldwell, especially about taking 100 days for an egg to mature. Because I remember when I was going through this journey, I was having all these food allergy issues. There were cyclical issues for me. Doctors were telling me, when I was in college, that, there's a possibility, I might not be able to have children. I was kind of swallowing that pill of, the unknown, not assuming, but that was an unknown. That was a possibility. And I do remember learning that it can take 3 cycles, basically, right, 90-ish days, to kind of have something reset in your body. So, like, let's say you're eating dairy and dairy is a problem. You really need to have 90 days, 3 cycles to get through to start to see the benefit of that change in a level of regularity. So when you're talking about, when we first start to see irregularities, we need to not panic. I think that's very important for us to know in these circumstances, because on some, I think, levels, there's this like, oh, hey, great, it has been no period for like 3 to 6 months, and that's awesome. And then other times you start to realize, actually, if you didn't know this, fun fact, a regular period is a sign actually of good health. So Dr. Caldwell, you were talking about that 100-day cycle that you were mentioning with the egg developing. I was mentioning how, when we make a change, we often should expect a good 3 cycles before we start to see the full benefit of it.
Correct. Yes. And it helps to use an app like Flow or Clue. There's so many apps these days where a woman can even put her information in about her bleeding, and the app sometimes even gives advice, about things, although you have to be careful to listen to all of it. But basically, if you think of it as, okay, I'm in a learning process right now. I don't want to overreact and do anything, that's going to hurt the situation, but just pay attention. And then we have so many resources out there for girls, a lot of women, young women especially, or really, now even older women, their moms were just treated with birth control starting in the 60s. So the moms don't have the period awareness and the cycle, intelligence, about what's normal. So a lot of times, girls can't go to their moms or their grandmothers and say, help me, is this normal? Because mom's going to say, let's just get on the pill, because that's what I did. Right. So we don't want to jump to that. We want to learn. So good resources. Laura Bryden, Dr. Laura Bryden has a great book called The Period Repair Manual. And it's really just a great resource where she doesn't advocate for birth control. She advocates for understanding and self-awareness. And things like the Hormone Genius podcast and Natural Womanhood. Those are some great places to just learn what's normal, because sometimes, especially in early adolescence, it is quite common and actually normal to not have a regular cycle. Mm-hmm. And that can also happen at the end of the reproductive lifespan in the 40s. Or some women even in their 30s can start to have some irregularities that harken to, maybe menopause is going to come early for me. Mm-hmm. So by paying attention and making note of it and tracking in some way, that's the first step.
And I'm glad you just mentioned that, irregularities are okay and can happen, especially earlier on in life, because I remember diving into some of the research on breast cancer. And when we're overly focused on the way the cycle is happening, we're actually impacting risk of cancer down the road. Are you able to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So man,
Whole
breast.
other
So
topic.
yeah, no, it's so great. Yeah. So our breasts, just like our brain, just like our uterus, and every cell in the body, really depends on us ovulating well, making estrogen, making progesterone. There are definitely studies that show that low progesterone, that hormone that's made after ovulation for the last 2 weeks of the cycle, is really critical for the helping the breasts to kind of mature and to balance the effect of estrogen. So our breasts don't like one hormone and not another, or fake hormones. Our breasts do not like birth control hormones. That definitely we know can lead to cancer, because the breasts of the adolescent, the woman who has not had a baby yet or had a full-term delivery, are still in a very immature state, and the birth control pill is a carcinogen. So if in a woman who's already had a baby, she is not going to be as affected by that carcinogen, because her breast development has become at it's met its maturity. But a young woman who's exposed to birth control still has that vulnerability to the carcinogenic effect. But also women who have miscarriages and abortions, who have an abrupt discontinuation of their hormone. In other words, the breasts are being exposed to the hormones, and then abruptly the increasing hormones, the hormones get really, really high in pregnancy. And when there's an abrupt end of the pregnancy, especially in abortion, because it's so unnatural, the breasts are kind of stuck in this system of just having to heal from that, and it's very unnatural. So anyway, so there's lots of ways the breast can be vulnerable to cancer.
It's fascinating. And I mean, we could talk about uterine cancer and all number of areas where this is being impacted by irregularity of women's health today. And the band-aid of, okay, so the most common thing you hear, there's some slight irregularity in a woman's cycle. That might not even be why a young girl or an adult woman goes to a doctor, but it's brought up, and lo and behold, boom, the first thing recommended is birth control. Now, you and I know that the birth control pharmaceutical industry is so financially lucrative. This is why we're hearing about all kinds of different types of new birth control practically every day. And that's part of the reason why physicians are so quick to recommend them, because physicians can receive financial perks for prescribing certain types of medications. And so that's a big alert sign for us, but they also don't know real solutions for women's bodies. So if a woman's going through any type of irregularity, what can she do at home? And then I want to talk a little later about what would be done when medical intervention is needed, and how to know that's necessary.
Yes. So like I said before, I think just stopping, pausing, okay, this is going on, this is happening to me. I'm not a big fan of Google in many places, but this is a place where, a woman would want to look into, okay, what is normal? But again, we want to use really good resources. Laura Brydon, like I said, her book and she has resources, Hormone Genius, Natural Womanhood. So tracking the cycle, and then actually starting to really ask yourself, okay, am I getting enough sleep? Am I, could I be anemic? Just really, I mean, sometimes we just kind of push ourselves. We push through. Women just push through so many times without recognizing, like, man, maybe I'm not getting what I need. So by just connecting to our body, befriending our body, and saying, getting curious, like what could be going on. Before
Vitamin D deficiency, iron deficiencies,
exactly,
not exercising, not going outside, right? Like there's a lot to do beforehand. Yes. Okay, so I'm linking to all these resources that you are literally blowing us up with. My poor male producers on the team right now are like, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now as their poor guys are helping pull up all these links, but we're throwing them out there. You mentioned the period repair manual, the website Natural Womanhood. You mentioned the Clue app, Flow app. So I'm including links in the episode notes as well as on social media, because this is a huge help. And this is part of the reason why this is so important. So gentlemen, if you're with me, stay with me, because women are literally having abortions and using abortive contraception, that is contraception that functions as an abortion, knowingly or unknowingly, because there isn't enough information about women's health today. And so this is starting them on a journey of physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually damaging chemicals that are literally chemical bombs to their body, and they don't even know it. So let's go into the next step. You've worked on more of the natural side. Things maybe still aren't working out, or maybe you accidentally or intentionally say something to your physician about irregularity in your cycle. Who should you go to? And if you're not with the right person, what do you do to properly navigate and protect yourself from just being put on harmful medications?
Yeah. Well, one really good early question to ask your doctor is to ask them, tell them what's going on. And if the doctor just quickly gives you a prescription, then you're at the wrong place right there. You just back away and you email Timmery. I'm kidding. Or me or something. Yeah.
Yes, we'll take it. We'll help you.
Yeah,
send
we'll
links.
take it.
But
Yes,
but they're in the
absolutely.
episode notes too.
But that's a first clue, because if somebody is not going, if somebody's just going to try to quote unquote fix a period problem with a pill without actually, helping you understand. So you should ask the question, why is this happening, and can we do some work up? Can we do a lab? Can we do some testing? I would, recommend very basic, thyroid testing, ferritin, which is an iron test. Your ferritin is a measure of the whole body iron, and it's more sensitive than a CBC, a complete blood count. Ferritin should be, in men, ferritin is above 100. But in most women I see who are having periods, their ferritin is less than 30, which is a cause for many anxiety. It's cause for fatigue. It's cause for an exacerbation of, in other words, some women can have more. So our cycle can naturally cause some mental instability, some mood instability, some physical instability, just because of the hormones. But when things are off in our physiology, like our iron levels, for example, those ups and downs in our hormones can actually cause severe symptoms like headaches, severe breast pain, severe insomnia, anxiety, when naturally we wouldn't be as vulnerable. So you definitely want to ask about iron testing or ferritin testing, thyroid testing, and there's a whole panel of labs like prolactin, PCOS labs. I don't know if we want to go off into that, but there is a kind of a workup for polycystic ovarian syndrome, looking at fasting insulin levels, and that again, I would refer you back to Dr. Laura Bryden to look at, and she tells you exactly what labs to test for that. I mean, you literally could walk into your doctor's office with that book, the Period Repair Manual, and see if the doctor even knows anything. I mean, it's really a good resource.
That's fantastic. And I like that you mentioned, like, walk into the doctor's office with that book, because maybe I'm just a part of a nerd herd here, but there have been countless times where I have had to advocate and fight for my health by saying, well, what about this? What about the connection here? And I've been to doctors who didn't even think of or know that there was a connection, and I was actually introducing them to a new field of medicine. They're like, that's interesting.
Yes.
Sure, okay. And I will tell them, these are the labs I would like drawn, because I'm doing the homework to try and help piece this information together. And that's frustrating, Dr. Caldwell. But if we want true healthy resources in a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical age that we live in today, we kind of have to, so that we don't just have these drugs being pushed down our throats, literally.
Right, and I really do think that doctors, women's health doctors, are of goodwill, and they really want to help their patients, but they have been taught a very very limited set of tools for irregular periods. They've been taught a lot more, with regards to how to manage a pregnancy, for example. Lots of different tools, but when somebody comes in with irregular periods, heavy periods, it's really just, kind of birth control or IUD or hysterectomy. I mean, it's a very small set of tools. And if we don't kind of push back against that paradigm, then nothing's going to change. So it will take women kind of walking in and saying, no, that's not going to work for me. And then a doctor of goodwill should get curious and say, wow, okay, this is interesting. Thank you for showing me this. Maybe let's work. Let's see. If you don't mind, I'm learning. Okay, great. Let's do it together. Yeah.
Now, and we, of course, recommend NAPRO physicians. You are a NAPRO physician. NAPRO physicians were trained at the Pope Paul VI Institute, answering the call of Pope St. Paul VI regarding women's health and fertility and the crisis in our culture of birth control, and where the church fits into that. There's a lot more that we could discuss on that front, but these are usually Catholic doctors, but at least there's a strong level of morality, Catholic morality, behind these doctors who train here. So I highly recommend them. We're going to include links on how to find an NAPRO physician or a fertility care practitioner, because you might start working with a fertility care practitioner who would help you in charting your cycle and being able to indicate and know, areas of health and unhealth in your cycle and watch it yourself. So those are some resources. We're going to take your questions. If you have any questions, the number's 1-888-914-9149. And Dr. Caldwell also really does address the important topic of fertility and infertility. So if you have a question there, we're happy to take it. And I love it. Thank you, gentlemen, for sticking with us. Nathaniel from Colorado is on the line. Nathaniel, what question do you have about your daughter?
Yeah, she has really painful menstrual cramps. And I didn't know if there was, some resource or something we could kind of look into, or what ideas you might have for us on that.
Oh, yeah, great. Yes. Okay, so it's a good idea to, if you could talk to a doctor, even the pediatrician, just to have a sense of, how severe is the pain, and just what has been tried. So that's the first question we usually ask. Have you tried Advil? Have you tried Aleve? And if those work, then great. Then chances are with time, the periods will get probably better, because she's in a transition period. During adolescence, there's a lot of bumpy symptoms that can happen that will even out over time. I would also recommend that she look at Dr. Laura Bryden, the Period Repair Manual book. That's a really good guide for painful periods and supplements that can be used. Mm-hmm. Magnesium is one that she's going to recommend. The other thing is to have a trial to avoid cow's milk, cow's dairy, for a couple 2 to 3 months, and see, because some people, it's a real trigger, and it can really cause any painful condition to be more painful, especially periods. But fish oil, you'll see a whole list of supplements in there. And then we always want to, just in the back of our mind, have the possibility, know that there's a possibility of endometriosis when periods are really, really painful. And that's why just having a conversation, because let's say she's missing 2 days of school a month, that's really significant. And that really needs maybe to see a NAPRO doctor, or she really needs to be seen by someone who kind of specializes in restorative women's health, just to make sure that she's not, we're doing everything that we can do. And some women, even natural progesterone can help. Prometrium, like giving that 10 days a month, can sometimes really help with pain and heavy flow. So those are just some thoughts, but hopefully you can reach out and find somebody to kind of talk to about it.
Excellent resource. And you keep bringing up Dr. Laura Bryden's book, Period Repair Manual. We're linking on social media and in the episode notes all of these resources. But if you're wanting to look it up right now, Dr. Laura Bryden, that's Lara, Bryden spelled Bryden, Period Repair Manual. Again, that's linked on social media. Just follow me at Timmerie, Timmerie. And I actually do have a follow-up question on natural progesterone, but we'll come back on that in just a moment. We're going to be talking about rejecting versus embracing the female body, and also what's happening on the front of abortion and kind of how it's influencing even the culture surrounding those children who are wanted, and how we look at our children as women and as people of faith. Interesting topic. I'll be right back with Dr. Susan Caldwell. You can find her at drsusancaldwell.com. Caldwell spelled Caldwell. We'll be right back here on Trending. Are you tired of educational options that are one size fits all? Our sponsor, Colby Academy, offers the flexibility of both accredited online and traditional school-at-home options to fit the needs of your child. Visit relevantradio.com/Colby.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
It's great to be with you. We are with Dr. Susan Caldwell today. She is a women's health expert. We're going to be talking about rejecting versus embracing the female body. If you missed our last segment together, tons of resources. This is like an absolute bomb of 20 minutes helping you with regard to women's health, women's cycles, periods, irregular, regular, what to do about it, and incredible resources. So if you know someone who's struggling, everything from intense cramps to irregularity, being encouraged to go on birth control, you are equipped with what you need to know to work on it at home, and then when the time comes, working with a physician to protect yourself from being put on birth control. So joining me now is Dr. Susan Caldwell. You can find her at drsusancaldwell.com. That's CALDWELL.com. Tons of awesome resources and articles there. Let's talk, Dr. Caldwell, about this challenge in our culture we're living in, and I think we see it presenting itself in many ways. This ideological acceptance that we can reject our bodies, like inherently reject our bodies, our God-given bodies. And it comes out, I think, most blatantly in the transgender movement today, of this outright rejection of the body, where, especially for women, we're seeing this onslaught of countless girls coming out suddenly as transgender. It's with what's referred to as sudden gender onset, with no prior direction at all pointing toward a gender dysphoric identity. But I think what it does point to is this acceptance that if you hate your body, you can reject your body, and woohoo, you can call yourself a man now and just take cross-sex hormones, and that works. But I think it happened much sooner than that, with this idea of the rejection of what is feminine, such as our bodies, the ability to have children. But I think it also goes into this whole topic of where we're discussing fertility and cycles. So I want to hear your thoughts on this whole challenge of the body today.
Yeah. Wow. Here we are in Lent, right? And we are celebrating this beautiful season that will lead us to Easter, but we just celebrated Christmas, right? About the incarnation of God, right? God became a human with a body, right? And so when that happened, our bodies became a target for the enemy, right? So there is a tendency for us automatically out of the womb to somehow be at war with our body, to not like our body. We have these ideas that something's wrong with us from the beginning. I mean, think back, maybe on the playground, you didn't like the color of your skin or the type of hair you had or your pimples. This is not new that we would somehow not like our body. But something really sinister happened with the advent of the birth control pill, because we've always had this idea, this Manichaean idea that the body is bad. This is an old philosophy. And then Rene Descartes taught us, I think, therefore I am. So automatically we're at this dualistic,
yes.
There's this, what I think I am and what I actually have in my body. I am my body. I am my body. So it's not something that we can just detach ourselves from. So where I see this is in the realm of birth control and IVF. Right. So what women are doing and what I did, right, this is, mea culpa. I mean, this is where I learn, we learn from the hard way, a lot of times. And I'm just sharing that. But, I didn't like my cramps. I didn't like the fact that I could get pregnant if I had sex. I didn't like a lot of things about my body. I didn't like my acne. And so the doctor offered me this little pill. Right. But what happens is when we accept things like that, then all of a sudden now we believe this lie that I can control my body. I can, and it's not, you're not doing it. Now I could understand, if you have a heart disease and you're taking a medicine to help your body to function better, this is a totally different philosophy. But when you're taking something that changes your, in other words, a woman who's ovulating and takes the pill, you're taking a healthy person and making them sick by taking a medicine. And then so as I didn't think anything of it, right? I'll just take it, and sure, it could have problems, but I'm feeling good in the moment. So we're exchanging, we're saying I want short-term relief without really considering the long-term effects, which in my case with birth control was infertility. And so, I just saw a woman the other day who had been through 3 cycles of IVF.
Oh, my heart goes out to her.
One of her pregnancies was a twin pregnancy, and one of the twins died as a stillborn at 37 weeks. And we just sat there together, and I mean, it was just the silence and the grief, because we just turned, and she agreed, and we just mourn this together. But we turn ourselves. It's like we go to the doctor and we just turn over our bodies to be manipulated for an outcome, without really considering that this is my body.
Right.
I'm not a thing. I am a person to be loved and to be cared for and to be treated with dignity and to be restored to health, not to be manipulated in order for an outcome, even a good outcome like a baby.
And you're here working with these women who are picking back up the pieces of the mess that has impacted their bodies, where they were told, okay, you'll have a baby with in vitro fertilization. And the success rate is extremely low for in vitro fertilization. Right. You have to get through multiple horrific rounds of in vitro fertilization to have any sort of success rate often. And it's damaging. I mean, for those who don't know, Dr. Caldwell, I know you're very candid about it, but you shared your story here. You have a past of having used in vitro fertilization in order to conceive children, and it destroyed your body. And I mean, you've chronicled, like, from the contraception to the rejection of cramps and acne, to the fact that you don't like to get pregnant if you have sex. And I mean, you were going through medical school and all these things that, that you accomplished. Like, you were there in the midst of that lie that women are being told to just literally nuke your body with hormones. We're literally putting chemical bombs in our bodies, and then we're expecting them to function properly, whether it be through IVF or hormonal contraception or even abortion. And yet our bodies are being destroyed by this. And like you mentioned, it's that heresy of dualism really within the church, this rejection of body and soul. We are a body and soul composite. We're not just one versus the other. And what we do to the body impacts the soul. And on the level of the soul, how we interact impacts the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the woman who I encountered who had been through the IVFs, she said, I just feel, this, now her children were a little bit older, but she said, I really just feel bad. And no one has ever been able to tell me why I wasn't healthy. And I'm still, and now she's even less healthy, and that's what's so hard is that, the just dismissal. The woman was dismissed by the doctors in terms of her as a person.
Right.
But then those of us who have been accomplice of that, like we allowed that to happen. So we in turn start dismissing ourselves. I guess, I'm fine. As long as I'm a mom, as long as I have a baby, I'm fine. It doesn't matter if I'm healthy. I guess I'm supposed to be tired. I guess I'm supposed to be sick, and that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. We're supposed to be whole.
And that comes all the way back to our prior conversation that we had earlier on this episode about, when we reject our bodies and we reject the cycle, when we reject the difficulty that a period does bring and the changing of hormones, we're rejecting what God gave us, but it doesn't have to be difficult the way in which women are experiencing today as a result of food, thyroid issues, vitamin deficiencies, unhealthy lifestyle. So we talk about resources for that. If you weren't with us, please listen to this episode, share it with a friend, because this is a powerful conversation. We have a question coming in. Lisa from San Diego has a question about being premenopause and serotonin. Lisa, what's your question for Dr. Caldwell today?
Yes, hi, doctor. Thanks for
Hi.
touching bases on this subject because there's a little bit of information out there for us women that are going through premenopause and we're going through a change and we don't know this change, right? I am going through this change and I went to the doctor to get lab tests and I don't know what I need to be looking for, but I feel anxious. I feel the lack of sleep and I know I'm going through premenopause, but he referred me to take a small dosage of birth control, and I've never done that. I don't want to go through that, and I don't know what type of question or what I need to be asking him so I can get the direction. And I think I did go into serotonin on Amazon. I purchased something, and I felt better, but I don't know if there's something else for us premenopausal women.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm with you. So welcome to the club. Yes.
Yeah.
And I've been having to learn, the hard way because this is not something I learned in medical school. So I'm going to sound like I work for Dr. Laura Bryden, but she does have a book called The Hormone Repair Manual where she's just the best teacher in this space right now. So it's a book or a Kindle, but she actually has a quote unquote prescription for menopausal sleep, and she'll say taurine at night, magnesium at night, L-theanine, but the big thing that you have to understand, and she explains it in the book, is that as you approach your 40s, you start to lose progesterone. Progesterone is nature's Xanax. If you're familiar with that drug, it's a very calming drug. So normally our body makes that compound every month after we ovulate for 2 weeks. But once we hit around 40 years old, that hormone kind of goes away. So a lot of women in their 40s experience anxiety and sleep problems. I know I did, along with heavy periods. Those are the 3 symptoms of that. And so you can actually take natural progesterone or prometrium at night, and it is such a good treatment if it's as a prescription. So you can definitely try the supplements. If you're still having periods, you can't take prometrium every single night of your life. You're going to have to take it, maybe 2 weeks of the month, like the second half of the cycle. But there's different ways to do it. Another resource that you can look up actually, Dr. Bryden will mention it, but there's a site called CEMCOR, CEMCOR. It's a Dr. Geraldine Pryor out of Canada, and she explains different ways to use progesterone in either the adolescents or perimenopausal women. And you could actually, look that up and bring that to your doctor.
What was that again? Simcor, you said?
CEMCOR.
Okay, Simcor. Great. We'll link to that.
ubc.ca is what I have. Yeah. So, and Geraldine Pryor is her name, but yeah, I read, I looked at that website, and I think any doctor of goodwill could look at that and say, wow, I'm learning something, a tool I can use in the toolbox. So that may really help you.
Let's actually dive into a question. I was emailed this earlier because we were talking a lot about synthetic progesterones with regard to contraception over the last week. And a listener wrote in from Green Bay, and she said, I heard you talking about progesterone versus prometrium recently. She said she has to take it for endocrine reasons. She has PCOS. And so she's asking basically, how do you distinguish and know if you're receiving natural progesterone or not?
So prometrium is going, or the generic for that,
Yes.
is going to be a gel capsule. It's almost like a gummy. It's not a gummy, but it's like a gelatin squishy capsule. I believe Provera is a tablet. So that's one way. And then the word methyl, I'm looking at, let's see, Provera's other name is, I just want to make sure I'm not, I'm not saying the wrong thing because I don't prescribe it. So, what's another name for Provera? Medroxyprogesterone acetate. So that would be the other. So if it's Provera or medroxyprogesterone acetate, then that's the synthetic. Again, it's a tablet. It's a a tablet that crumbles as opposed to a squishy jelly looking oval or round. And so it's just not going to. It's not natural, and your body is just not going to receive it as natural. And your body, again, our breasts, our brain, our uterus. All of these things, cells in our body, really are wanting the natural permetrium and not the synthetic.
Okay, real quick, one last question, and we can rattle this off quickly, and I'll include links where we've discussed it. Martha from Miami's asking for other alternatives to birth control, like if you have PCOS.
Yes. So Prometrium. I use that universally in women with PCOS.
Yep.
So I use it. It's Prometrium. It's a prescription. It should be. There's 2 different protocols for that. The NAPRO protocol. There's a low dose and a high dose of Prometrium for PCOS, and that is that is given to kind of restore the we call it the HPO axis, so the hypothalamus pituitary in the brain, 2 glands in the brain, both are speaking to the ovaries. So when those three glands, 2 in the brain, and of course the ovaries are two in the pelvis, they're all speaking to each other. They're like on a loop. They're on a loop. And so when a woman takes natural progesterone in the last 2 weeks of her cycle, it helps restore communication in that loop. So it helps a woman to ovulate. That's one of the things that it does for PCOS. But of course, with PCOS, we want to know the type of PCOS the woman has. So if she has insulin-resistant PCOS, she's got to get off sugar. She's got to really get rid of carbs and sugar, not rid of, but lower carbs and sugar in her diet. If she has androgen PCOS, progesterone is a great answer for that. There could be adrenal PCOS, which is a result of stress. So she would have to look at, what's stressing her and what resources maybe she needs to conserve a little bit. So there's just different types. So, but almost every PCOS patient will need progesterone at some point, and it needs to be natural progesterone.
Yeah. And I was able, and we could talk about compounding progesterone being better. I was on progesterone for a while because I had PCOS and Hashimoto's disease. And with treating my thyroid and being on progesterone for a while, we've been able to reverse and treat my PCOS. That I'm not having symptoms. I don't have to be on progesterone now. And so these are things that are so great about our NAPRO doctors. We'll post links to them on social media. Dr. Caldwell, thank you so much for joining us today on Trending, answering our women's health questions that are so important. This episode is a true gold mine of resources, and those resources are in the episode notes. So find this episode tonight, relevantradio.com/trending, or wherever you catch your podcast. We are there, and please do yourself and do a woman in your life a favor and send this episode via text link to them. It is a powerful and helpful tool that they need. The Catholic Order of Foresters, the sponsor of our studio line, is hiring today. Several positions are available throughout the U.S. Visit relevantradio.com/foresters to learn more about how you can find your vocation with COF. An Illinois Life Insurance Society, not licensed in all states.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
A lot of you were with me at the beginning of the year as I had my baby girl at the end of the year, and then lo and behold, we ended up in the NICU with a newborn. 5 days in the NICU, and for anyone who's been in the NICU with a child, my heart just goes out to you. It's very, very challenging, and it's scary. By the grace of God, you guys were surrounding me with prayer and support, and I had so much peace, even if very, very, very little sleep. Very little sleep. I remember, I think we were on day 4 in the NICU, and I had not slept. It was like maybe moments here and there. But something really interesting happened while I was in there, and there's so much I could say as I continue to process it all. But when I was in the NICU, I was astounded by something that happened there. I was there were 2 NICU wards where I was at, and the whole time I was there for those 5 days, I only ever saw one other parent. The babies were all there in isolation, cared for only by the nurses that were there. And my jaw dropped. I didn't know what to think at first. I was angry, upset. My heart was breaking. They would have these babies in these huge machines that they were transporting through the hospital, coming in and out from surgeries, and there would be no parent with them. And I get on one side, some parents are just having to get back to work or are having to take care of other children and doing what they're doing. But, 5 days with 2 separate NICUs right there, it was devastating. And what I really realized, especially because I was there 24/7. I would hear the doctors and the nurses on the phone at times with the parents. And one of the things when you have a baby in the NICU, if you ever find yourself there, one of the best things you can do is keep your baby skin to skin. It helps regulate emotions, heart rate, breathing. It helps with healing. And so I really had my baby skin to skin the whole time. I was up 24/7 with her. The doctors, the nurses really said this is why she thrived, she recovered, and we were able to leave as soon as we were, and why she's doing so well now. And I would hear the doctors on the phone like saying, hey, if you want your baby, to get healthy, you really need to do skin to skin with the baby. And she's saying this to parents who I hadn't seen showing up. And this isn't a moment of parent shaming, but this is what it dovetails into as I was really thinking about why aren't these parents here? Again, I mentioned there's some parents who couldn't be there because, maybe they had other children. Maybe they had to work in order to fund having that baby in the NICU ward. Everyone has a different story. But to have this be something universal across 2 separate NICU wards, on the floor I was in at this children's hospital, that something is going on. And what is going on, I know, is a pro-abortion culture that we live in. The anti-motherhood culture we live in. That this improper detachment from children, from babies, from newborns, is fueled by a culture of abortion that says that a child can be either wanted or unwanted and I can abort a baby, or I could have aborted you and so I can kind of treat you differently. I can reject you. I can say I'm not the mothering type. I can say, this is just too hard. I need to leave. I need to get my sleep. I need to cope in other ways. And at the end of the day, we've hit a point in our culture where it's acceptable to reject a human being, to literally reject a human being in the name of quote unquote choice, in the name of careerism, in the name of feeling criticized, fear of being the mommy or the daddy type, fear of having no worth outside of your child and needing to chase that in a career. This pro-abortion culture, this radical form of feminism, of second and third wave feminism, is what has fueled this unbearable and sorrowful detachment from parents toward their children, especially mothers. I mean, I'm telling you, 2 floors of NICU emergency wards in a children's hospital, and I only ever saw one other parent in that entire 5-day time. And I was there 24/7 with my baby. I did not leave that room. And if I left the room, I made sure a nurse was with her. Well, I would just go and use the restroom. I mean, and I'm not saying, hey, yay, I did a great job. But what I'm saying is this is how unhealthy this detachment of motherhood and children has gone because of the abortion culture. That even in the midst of when we are choosing life, there's confusion about what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a mother. How to discover that painful discovery of sacrificial love. I hear from so many women, well-intentioned, well, I'm just not the mothering type. Or, I just don't know what to do, and so I leave. I chose, to do other things. And I really want to recommend this book by Erica Kumazar. She's been a guest here. It's titled Being There, Why Prioritizing the First 3 Years Matters. And she talks about not just the first 3 years, but in general, child psychology and the needs, what all these psychologists know, but they're not willing to say because of how intense the pro-abortion and radical feminist culture is. And it's this idea of being present. It's a choice. It's a challenge. Sometimes it takes building habits, making choices, seeking out resources, asking advice. And if we don't do that as people of faith and building up mothers, encouraging parents, we're going to see NICUs like I saw, where these babies are abandoned. We have to fight to choose life in our battle against abortion, but we also have to fight to choose life by helping fortify those mothers who have chosen life but are struggling to figure out and pick up the pieces of what motherhood is in a culture that has radically opposed, rejected, and shamed women out of living their maternal gifts. Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom, Our Lady, Mother of the Infant Jesus, pray for us.